This episode is being sponsored in part by Calvin University. What do Ken Jennings, Rick Steves, Esau McCaulley, and N.T. Wright have in common? They've all spoken at the January series at Calvin University. The January series is a free 15-day lecture series that takes place each year at Calvin University and aims to cultivate deep thought and conversations about the most important issues of the day in order to inspire cultural renewal and help people learn how to be better global citizens in God's world. The 2024 January series runs from January 15th to February 2nd, and it's available in person and virtually. This year's speakers include Lerone Martin, Matthew Desmond, Felicia Song, and many more. You can register today at calvin.edu/January-series. That's calvin.edu/January-series. Thanks to Calvin University for sponsoring this episode. Welcome to a very special episode of The Holy Post. This week we have a recording of our recent live event in Wheaton, Illinois, where Phil, Kaitlyn, and I were joined by New Testament professor, award-winning author, and New York Times columnist Esau McCaulley. We gathered before a live audience of Holy Post Plus subscribers for a great time. In this episode, we review what happened in 2023 and offer our picks for the most important stories of the year. Topics range from Tim Keller's passing, the navel-gazing of American evangelicals, and the comfort of Cracker Barrel biscuits. We also offer our predictions for 2024, and then Esau joins the audience to play multiple hilarious rounds of Bluff the Listener. Plus, Phil shares the story of a 57-year-old woman who experienced an adverse event in an MRI machine. Okay, we're going to jump right into the live show after the theme song. Here is episode 597.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post.
And sometimes Kaitlyn.
Okay, we're going to do a couple of stories. We're going to talk about the stories of the year. We have a special guest. We're going to talk about stories of the year. We're going to look backwards to 2023, and we're going to look forwards to 2024, and we're going to put on our prognosticator caps and choose. And we talked about this like last week on the podcast, that the story I picked for the story of last year turned out to kind of be the story of last year. Right?
This year.
This year, last year.
Yeah.
Next year for last year.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you, what was it again?
AI.
Well, that wasn't hard.
Oh, it's easy to say that now because it became the big story of the year, but a year ago we didn't know how big it was going to be.
Okay. So we'll see. You guys listen to what we think is going to be the big stories of 2024, and then
we'll
come
back in a year and have some cookies over at the office.
Somebody.
And yeah, that's cool.
And we're going to do some audience participation stuff towards the end.
So I have a story to do first. Before we do that, before we introduce our special guest, and I haven't done this in quite a while, so I need to pull this out. And can you hold your mic up so I can yell in your mic? Thank you. Just need to make sure it's tuned. Does it sound tuned? Does it sound tuned? Kaitlyn? Okay. Okay, you ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Okay.
Now it's time for news of the butt.
Okay.
You had me participate in that without knowing what I was getting into.
Your mom's going to be so excited. Woman enters MRI machine with a gun and gets shot in the butt. I don't make these up. I just want you to know I don't make these up. And it doesn't bring me pleasure to have to report them. But the mainstream news doesn't cover this stuff because they're in bed with Big Pharma. So we have to cover it. A 57-year-old woman was shot in the buttocks by her own gun when she took it into a magnetic resonance imaging machine while she was having a test. And the weapon was, and I think this is the medical term, was grabbed up by the machine's magnet.
My weapon's been grabbed up.
I've been redeemed, causing the gun to go off. The incident happened in June and was sent to the Food and Drug Administration as a, quote, adverse event report. Imagine that office. It was like, oh, what's an adverse event report? Oh, a butt shot. The injury was reported as minor. Now that raises questions.
I have multiple questions.
Yeah.
Significant questions. Was it the size of the wound to the size of the butt
No.
that made it a
No,
minor
no.
injury?
Okay, I have not had an MRI.
I have.
Okay. My understanding is
scary.
when you do have an MRI, aren't you like in a hospital gown kind of situation?
No. Well,
Yeah?
they did it to my head.
Appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they couldn't put my head in a hospital gown. It's too big.
Well, okay. But I don't know.
Your head.
Hospital gown, am I right? Is that generally the way it's... No? Depends.
Depends, yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, how did they not know she had a
Right.
gun
Did
on
she
her?
hide it?
In her. No, we're not going there. Totally not going there. So apparently, the giant magnet. Have you ever seen an MRI machine with the cover off going?
No.
It's like the Stargate. It's scary. It's this huge thing spinning super fast, which is why it's so loud if you're in one. Have you ever been in an MRI?
No.
Don't go. If they say, we're going to give you an MRI, say no.
I
No.
think I will do it.
I'll just self-examine. I'm good. What I'm trying to figure out is the magnet pulls the gun. This whole catching up the
No,
gun.
no. Stop thinking about
That's
it.
a Rapture
please.
reference.
Didn't you say earlier too that they specifically tell people not to
Oh, yeah.
bring a weapon?
Yeah. According to the FDA report, the woman was asked if she was carrying a weapon.
Which is insane.
Are you carrying a weapon? Because you can't go in an MRI machine with a weapon.
crazy?
No. Sure hope this doesn't come back to bite me. The woman was asking if she was carrying a weapon, and she answered no. The report did not say where the woman was or the facility where the incident occurred, like where she was mentally.
Any guesses?
Yay.
Wisconsin.
Florida.
It is not the first time an MRI machine has grabbed up a weapon. Who's coming up with the nomenclature that discharged? Earlier this year, a man in Brazil had his gun grabbed by the magnet. It discharged, and the bullet struck him in the abdomen. He eventually died from his injuries.
That's a downer, Phil.
That's awful. No.
This has been the news of the butt.
Okay, we're doing great. We're right on. So if you ever go to an MRI,
Yeah, I won't bring a gun.
keep your sidearm in the car.
Okay.
Sidearm.
The one I totally definitely own, I will keep in the car.
Okay, we have a special guest. He's here. He came here all the way from Wheaton, Illinois. He is an award-winning author, New York Times columnist, NBA basketball fan, man about town in Wheaton. It's Esau McCaulley.
Aren't you glad you weren't out here earlier?
Who's playing
No
my
comment.
ukulele?
I've never been preceded by a butt commentary before, so
You have
this
been on the
this
show
is-
before.
Actually, you probably
but
have.
that's
Maybe
always
you have.
recorded after
Oh,
I
right.
get the interview, and whatever you all do when I'm not there, I don't hear it.
One thing people don't know, like before I do an interview with somebody who's never been on the show before we start recording, I will ask them, are you familiar with the Holy Post? And if they say no, I'm like, I just want to warn you. I don't know what episode this interview will be on, but it's possible that before your interview, there will be butt news. And I'm like, what?
But I haven't done butt news in a long time.
I know.
And the reason is some people don't like it. I know.
Yeah.
No, don't Don't revel in your victory. And some people say, I love your show, but I want to share it with my friends on the Upper East Side.
Yes.
And they don't do butt news. So can you make a classier show for my classy friends? And, I want to please
You
people.
sometimes oblige.
I sometimes oblige. Yeah. So I don't know how many people are happy that there haven't been butt news in a while.
John, I see you. Yes.
John? Man. Okay. 2023 Story of the Year nominees. Each one has been asked to pick a story in advance that we covered or didn't cover enough. That's what Skye thought the assignment was. He's wrong. But, and Esau, you did get the assignment, right?
Yes, I got the assignment.
You're not going to freak out when I get to you and just go blank.
No, I got something.
Okay, you got something. Okay, Esau wrote Reading While Black and the story of Esau McCaulley.
Called How Far to the Promised Land.
How Far to the Promised Land.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember exactly,
Yeah.
but I've read it.
And
it's
Josie
really
Johnson
good.
and the Holy Spirit.
Oh, that's right.
A kid's book.
Yeah, a kid's book. And you wrote a kid's Bible that's still in production.
Yes, it'll be out in 2025. Way to get ahead of that on the marketing.
Yeah. The 2025.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, though.
Never mind.
2 years from now,
Are you
Google
sure?
it.
Are you sure you wrote it?
Someone's listening to this
Yeah,
right
someone-
now
yeah,
in
right now in
2025.
2025 from the future. Go get
Right.
the book.
Yeah, they're laughing at the stories
Yeah.
we're about to predict. Okay. My story of the year was, I'm very proud that I coined a new term that has now been in the Washington Post and is being repeated in all intelligent salons and parlors across America of Christian Nashvillism. So my story of the year, well, first it's me and my ability to come up with new words. No, I'm kidding. It's the influence, the growing influence of Nashville, Tennessee, sucking Christian entertainers into one spot and creating kind of its own little terrarium ecosystem of Christian product. As I think we talked about on the show, Christian Nashvillism is what happens when the center of evangelicalism moves from centers of Christian thought, like Grand Rapids and Wheaton, to centers of Christian entertainment, like Nashville, centers of Christian product. And so particularly now when we're looking at groups like the Daily Wire moving to Nashville, Caleb moving to Nashville, the Babylon Bee, Dave Ramsey and his whole empire is in Nashville. There is a growing sort of symbiosis of entertainment, Christianity, Republican politics, and Southern culture. And it's very hard to unravel those threads. They're getting woven together so tightly, and it makes people like us, for example, Northern evangelicals, look really weird to this new kind of center of gravity of evangelicalism. Like we are, we're surely deconstructing because you don't eat grits and you don't vote Republican.
I mean, leave grits out of this, though.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I mean, you were on a roll. I was letting you cook, but leave grits alone.
Like the big, I wish Karen Swallow Pryor was here because she and I were involved in the great Cracker Barrel dust-up of 2022 when we
leave Cracker Barrel alone, too. What are you doing?
Esau?
I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm sorry. I'm from the South. You just
I know, but you've been here a while.
I apologize.
Now, yeah, when Karen Swallow Pryor and I were talking about the news story that you could actually predict how any county in the U.S., you had about an 80% likelihood of being able to predict how it voted in the 2020 election by whether it had more Cracker Barrels or more Whole Foods. That there's about an 80% alignment between voting patterns and those two establishments. And so I then went off on a tangent, and said, because what they talked about is that people that vote, that go to Whole Foods like to try new things. There's 89 cheeses? 47 olives? I want to try one of each. People that go to Cracker Barrel like comfort food, like to know they're going to like it again and again and again, and are more likely to get the same thing. And they say that you do see that in the different behavior between progressives and conservatives, that conservatives tend to be psychologically less excited about trying new things. Progressives tend to, So I pulled that into Christianity, which maybe was a mistake. I don't know. Sometimes I think every time I open my mouth, it may be a mistake. And said that Christianity has really gone in America to a Cracker Barrel Christianity, where it's really about comfort food and, chicken soup for the soul and reassure me over and over again. And what happened to the whole food Christianity? And boy, did people in Nashville on Twitter go nuts with that.
Have you had one of the biscuits from Cracker Barrel?
Yeah. What's your point?
Nothing. I just love the biscuit.
I didn't say it's not good. I actually like Cracker Barrel, and I'm not a big fan of Whole Foods. I don't like olives. I don't like stinky cheese. And I always feel a little bit elitist when I'm pushing my cart around with, anyway. That's neither here nor there. What was I talking about?
We don't know.
Unsure.
Christian nationalism.
Oh, Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
So, yes. So Cracker Barrel Christianity has declared war on me to get even with me. And I think that's going to be that's my big story for the year.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about next year yet. Okay. Kaitlyn.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, we have to
Can we
discuss.
talk about your story? Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
just clap.
Good job, Phil.
Thank you. Oh, we can talk about it.
I don't know if anyone wants to talk about it. I just wanted to give an opportunity to.
Okay.
Does anyone else agree that Christian Nashvillism is the most important story of 2023?
It's huge. Huge.
I don't know about most important, but I do think that's a helpful way. The shift you just described between the centers of thought and entertainment,
Yes.
I think are not just important for how that's shaped evangelicalism, but also when people talk about leaving evangelicalism, I think it complicates what they mean, because it's not so much clear-cut intellectual camps that we're talking about.
Right.
It's like, what have you consumed and how has it formed you? And so I hear people all the time that will be like, oh, I'm done with evangelicalism, but they have been really deeply shaped in the less than conscious level sometimes, because it's not like they stopped reading certain books.
What they're really done with is Hallmark Christmas movies. It's comfort food.
Yeah.
That's part of
But
rural
they might
culture.
not be very conscious of the way that those forms of entertainment shaped them on a subconscious level. So they might have left the church they were at, but if evangelicalism is more culturally defined, have they really left it, or the modes of thought that it kind of enculturated in them?
Yeah. See, Skye, that was worth talking about.
I didn't say it wasn't worth talking about.
You
I was giving everyone the
intimated.
opportunity to talk about it.
Okay.
That's all.
Esau?
I mean, I guess I'm trying to get over my love for Cracker Barrel. And I just wanted they norm that racially, because every black person I know in the South likes Cracker Barrel. But anyways, leaving it. I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let Cracker
bad
Barrel
about
go.
Cracker Barrel. I'm saying it's
I just love
comfort
it.
food.
I
It's
just
the
love the pancakes.
familiar.
I just love the pancakes. I just want to say that out loud. Okay. I was going to say, as it relates to Christian nationalism, there has been, to me, and I mean, I don't want to steal what I'm going to say is my story for 2023, but it relates to that, is there's always been a mob mentality as it relates to Christian arguments. But it feels like even more now, you're either on our side or you're off our side. And declaring you off our side doesn't actually have to be rooted in any data. It's just someone from Christian nationalism just says bad guy or bad girl. And everyone goes, oh, they said it, so it must be true. And so I do feel like the level of discourse, and if you go back 20, 30 years, for good or bad, it was like a coalition between certain portions of the Catholic Church and high-minded evangelicalism, who at least pretended to set the conversation for what's going to happen with Christianity in the public square. And that coalition between kind of the thoughtful Christians who were, in some sense, pushing the discourse, that's kind of gone. and it's been replaced by populism. And so in that sense, I think you're right.
Right. And I think a good example of that was when whoever pulled together the conference, did CT pull together the little Trump, what are we going to do about Trump secret conference?
No, but they were there.
Yeah, they were there.
Yeah.
So there was a secret conference. What are we going to do about Trump? Pulled together evangelical leaders. And some of the biggest names in evangelicalism. Fox News heard about it, called CBN, Christian Broadcast Network News, to say, tell us what is going on. Who are these anti-Trump? And CBN News said, we don't even know who these people are.
Yeah.
And it was most of the biggest leaders in evangelicalism. That's the gulf between populist evangelicalism and what used to be the leadership of evangelicalism.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what these guys have said already, I think what's interesting about it, I'm reminded of, this is a weird connection. Mahatma Gandhi, for a while, was flirting with Christianity, but he ended up not ultimately converting. And he said the problem was, it wasn't enough for him to believe in Jesus because the missionaries in India at the time and the British kind of imperial church wanted him to start wearing shoes when he worshiped and eating beef and basically becoming European. You weren't truly Christian until you were European. And he's like, if I'm going to be a Christian, I'm going to be an Indian Christian, not a European Christian. All that to say, when we confuse allegiance to Jesus with cultural artifacts or practices, eventually what ends up happening is all we care about are the cultural artifacts and practices, and we don't actually care about the allegiance to Jesus. So with Christian Nashvillism, what's sad is it feels like for some people, they don't really care. Are you in communion with God? Are you really committed to Jesus? Are you really seeking to produce the fruit of the Spirit through your connection with him? It's more, well, do you eat at Cracker Barrel? And do you do the things I do? And do you like the music I like? And do you live the way you should live? Because that's what makes you a Christian now, which makes sense why we've given up more and more caring. Do our leaders actually follow Jesus, or do they just make me comfortable in my existing practices? This is not unique to Christian Nashvillism. It happens in any cultural setting where the faith and the culture become too aligned. But so people can attack you without really asking, is he really committed to Jesus? All we know is he's critical of what we're doing culturally, so no, he's not a legitimate Christian.
Right. He said something about Cracker Barrel that made us unhappy.
Right.
I'm sorry.
He is far from Christ. Christ, Cracker Barrel, Christ, similar. Okay. Any more? Ready? Oh, yes.
Well, listening to Skye talk, I was thinking, this goes back, the way you have described it goes back to the larger polarization problem of the more that a diverse set of ideas about someone can easily be categorized in one thing. It's not like, oh, I'm a Republican, but I share all these other qualities of other different groups. Or I'm a Democrat, but I share all these other qualities with different groups. It's, no, I can know one thing about a person and put them in a category. And it generally is true. And I think sometimes when we talk about polarization, we're basically just talking about people disagreeing. And it's like, no, there's a difference. We have real disagreements, and that's a good thing. But the problem with polarization is it's not just that I disagree with someone. It's that everything about me as a person has been put in this one box, and everything about them is in another box. I don't have common ground with them because even if I vote differently from them, I share other features with them. Now it's like, no, anyone who's similar to me in any way is in the same category as I am, and I don't have other areas of common ground with other people.
So clearly you're saying story of the year.
I don't want to give it to you, Phil, but
We got to hear Kaitlyn's.
Yeah, we don't know what any of the other options are.
You guys are going to vote with applause at the end, because I know right now you think it's over. Don't decide so quickly. It's probably over, but don't decide so quickly. There's still more to come. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, bring it.
My story of the year, which I did take to mean the most significant story, at least for the things we cover, is the death of Tim Keller and the larger conversation around cultural engagement and political engagement, in part because after his death, there were a lot of people kind of talking about what is the legacy that he is leaving. And there have been some pretty vocal critics of him recently that are not just critics of particular features of his theology. They're critics of his winsomeness or, his willingness to say that the gospel is not encapsulated in a single party. And I do think there are larger rifts within evangelicalism that have been revealed by that conversation that don't just boil down to the Republicans and the Democrats. They boil down to actually really deep, important theological differences about what you think the mission of Christ on earth was, what that demands of us, and the relationship between the politics we hold and the kind of people we are. Like if you read Keller, a lot of what he was concerned with was the idea that there's not just in the Gospels and the whole of Scripture a kind of set of principles that we can apply to certain policies that we should support, but that they tell us what kind of people we should be in public life and that you can't separate those. And some of his most vocal critics have, I mean, plenty of them have, you know, legitimate objections to him, but one of the most common criticisms that I think has revealed that rift is the people saying, your winsomeness doesn't work. Look, the world doesn't really like you. We're now in a world that assumes poorly of Christians. And so your idea that you can win the culture by being kind and compassionate was wrong, which I think reveals some of the rift. Those of us who think that those true characteristics of Jesus that we are meant to imitate are just good things we should do, and those people who think they are good to the extent that they can be utilized towards some end. And I think those rifts are really important. The death of a really faithful person in and of itself, I think an important moment in the year, but also the larger conversation about what it means to be a faithful Christian in public life.
And there was a whole lot of criticism that his time, his era had passed.
Yeah.
He was a man suited to another time. And then people started talking about the notion we used to be in positive world.
Yeah.
Then this popped out.
Now we're in
we used to
negative
be
world.
in positive world where Christianity was considered a net positive for America. And since 2014,
Very specific.
Frighteningly specific, we now live in negative world.
There was neutral world in between there.
It was neutral world,
Yeah.
but it's like 12 years.
It was like very short.
Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
short period
Yeah.
of neutral time. And I can't tell if, Obergefell was the
I don't
trigger
know.
of negative
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
But it's so Keller, his soft-spoken, just smiling only works in positive world.
Yeah.
But the part I don't get about that argument is he spent decades in Manhattan.
Right.
In
And I don't think
positive
you can
Manhattan,
argue that-
when everyone loved Christianity in Manhattan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just, I find
But
that argument.
it still goes back
ridiculous.
to, did you think that was a strategy he used because he thought it would be
Right.
effective, or did he think he was imitating
Yeah.
Christ?
Oh, he wanted to be a jerk. He so wanted
If
to be
he
a
could have
jerk.
gotten away with
Yeah.
it, he would have done it. Yeah.
Jesus,
Yeah.
why?
He was a raging melon. Yeah.
That's good.
I was debating whether or not the passing of Keller was the story of the year, and it's a good.
So a vote.
It's
a
a good.
vote
No,
for
well,
me.
no, there's other aspects to it though beyond what you've said that I think are significant, and one is he was kind of one of the few unifying figures between a culturally engaged form of Christianity that is pro-neighbor. That's a language we use around the Holy Post a lot. We want to be pro-neighbor, including neighbors that are different than us, and very conservative in his theology. He was very orthodox, very conservative in his approach, and the bond between those two things seems to be looser and looser and looser. Now with his passing, it's almost broken, where it's either you're pro-neighbor or you're committed to Orthodox Christianity. It's like, that's ridiculous that those things are being pitted against each other. So I grieve his absence in being able to bring those worlds together. And then lastly, we're losing so many like significant Christian leaders that had broad appeal. And like, who is that now? Like, we've lost Eugene Peterson and Billy Graham and Dallas Willard.
Yeah.
And you don't see new people stepping into those roles. Maybe I'm blind and there are those people, but
Well, Franklin Graham.
like, so it feels like some of those like shared, like even if we don't all agree on everything, there are certain figures like, yeah, I'll get that person's book because we generally like their, but that's disappearing and that's sad to me.
But I think that's really important, Skye, too, in that, the classic thing that some historians will say is like, you can define evangelicals by who likes Billy Graham. And I do think there was a period there where at least a certain like new evangelicalism, you could say people who like Tim Keller. So I do think that is a good description of the fracturing of, and part of it is a political fracturing of like, there could be diversity of political opinion under some of those people. There were lots of things that Tim Keller believed that I did not agree with, but I knew he was a faithful person and I had learned from him throughout my life. But it feels like the way to get a big audience now is to be really extreme politically. And so even if I hypothetically might have other evidence to think you're a faithful Christian, I will be off put by the way that you're engaging politically. And that fractures a lot of the people that can't have that wide appeal anymore.
One of the things that I found interesting about Tim Keller's passing, or even like the latter portion of his life when he became controversial, is not his failure, but what I saw happen around him. So it seems to me, if you can look from afar, that Tim Keller was actually pretty measured. In other words, a lot of his influence was kind of behind the scenes, where he spent a long period of his life building trust as his respected kind of evangelical brand. And so the point of that is that you build trust so that you can be strategic and use it when it actually really matters. And so one of the things that surprised me about people like Tim Keller is that he had maximum like evangelical cred. And he had probably the biggest like bank account as far as like money to cash. And when he cashed that money, like it was insufficient funds. I was shocked by how quickly Keller became a bad guy because he acknowledged things like racism was real. You know, it's like, oh, like, in other words, when I was coming up, I thought if we can get Tim Keller to say it, then like it's great. And
It'll
then
be okay.
Yeah, and then
It
Tim
will
Keller
be
said the thing. Then they said Tim Keller's gone woke. I said no. He's permanently on the good side. He can't be on the bad side. And so when I was like, oh, Tim, welcome to the party. When he's over here not liked with me, I was like, oh, hey, Tim. And so I always thought that it would be the case. And there's probably other evangelical leaders who had the same experience. Maybe even some people at this place where I was surprised at how quickly someone who had been trusted, whose theology remained the same, who then engaged in cultural issues at a strategic point after not spending his career as a rabble-rouser, who then was called like liberal or lost his way or out of touch. So that was one of the things that was really revealing for me, because then it showed me that it doesn't really matter what your theology is. It doesn't really matter how much trust you have. You have to stay within certain, not theological lines, political lines.
Right.
And
Compare and contrast Tim Keller, Russell Moore.
Similar kind of outcome as far as how he was received when he did a similar thing. I don't know if Russell was as broad as Tim Keller before that, but that's just like, I think he might have been more clearly identified with the Southern Baptist Convention, and he became more broad post that.
Right.
Kind
And
of
if you're
moment.
clearly identified with the Southern Baptist Convention, and then the Southern Baptist Convention turns on you.
Yeah. So
Really?
but
Where-
it's a similar.
where am I?
There you could. I mean, I don't want to name all of the people, but like you can kind of go down the list of people who had you ask me in 2000, who are unassailable Christians with like universal approval and evangelicalism.
Beth Moore.
Yeah, I mean,
That's-
so I'm just, that's the part that I saw with Tim Keller. And even after he died, he didn't get the normal, like, you know, a couple days, let's remember his legacy. It was immediate kind of negative reaction, not negative, but like critical without even that kind of.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting.
A whole lot of commentary on he outlived his usefulness.
Which is kind of dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the whole, so it may be for me, I think if you die and
You talking about me?
Not anyone,
Okay,
if one
anyone.
dies. I mean, not you personally. If one dies and the only kind of criticism that you can have maybe points of strategy, I think that's in other words, he died without moral controversy. In other words, I thought that was the point of the Christian, is to finish well, not to live too long to where your politics no longer suited like significant portions of evangelicalism. So I just thought that some of the commentary around his passing was troubling.
I'll just add too, because I was thinking of Beth Moore as well when you were talking, Esau, of just one thing I appreciate about both of them that's been instructive to me of like, how do I want to live my life? Is that both of them, when the moment came, and I'm especially thinking of Beth, who I followed more than Tim Keller, when the moment came where all the credibility that they had been building up for Beth, with like millions of women slowly over time, overcoming a lot of obstacles to gain credibility in that world, when the moment came to risk that credibility for the sake of telling the truth and staying faithful to Christ, they were willing to do it, to sacrifice some of the credibility, to take a lot of heat. And I think both of their lives are instructive in that way of like what is required over the long run to be the kind of person that at the, height of a career, when it would be very easy to not say the hard thing, to keep your stadiums full of Living Proof Live events happening and your book sales and your whatever, to like have the courage to stay true to your Christian witness in that moment. That's, one of the things, again, when I look at the end of Tim Keller's life, I just think that is such a witness, to be willing to sacrifice the things that don't ultimately matter for the things that do.
Right. Tim Keller, Beth Moore, Taylor Swift.
I thought you were going to say Phil Vischer. My vote for unifying evangelicalism.
That would be funny.
Phil Vischer.
Okay. Skye, anything else to add to? This is kind of a big one. I agree. This is kind of a big
Another
one.
vote.
I hope that as time goes on, Tim Keller's legacy, I don't know how to say this delicately. Like, it kind of bothered me that when Ravi Zacharias died, like, heads of state were praising this guy. And then what comes out later, there were lots of controversies before he passed and evidence that things weren't right. But what comes out later, of course, is the horrific realities that were not known to people. And his reputation is just obviously plummeted. And it grieved me that when Tim Keller passed, you didn't see this outpouring of accolade and appreciation for his faithfulness. And my hunch is, as time goes on and years pass and we get some perspective, there's going to be a real rehabilitation of Tim Keller's value to the church. And sort of the inverse.
By whom?
I don't know.
Who will the leaders be that do that?
It might be 100 years from now, but people are going to look back at Tim Keller and his work and his writings and his engagement with culture and his faithfulness and his willingness to be courageous toward the end when he was called upon to be. And that will be validated and appreciated when everyone has forgotten who Ravi Zacharias was. And it is just a reminder that you need to have a long perspective. And if we just get focused on who likes me or doesn't like me on Twitter today,
right,
it's a bad way to live your life.
Right. All right, we got to move on. That is Kaitlyn's suggestion for Story of the Year. Skye Jitani.
All right, I feel dumb now. I took
You have never felt dumb a day in your life.
I hide it really well. I wanted a story that I thought was underappreciated that might actually end up affecting all of us more than we realize, because it's not like a big story.
Global warming.
No. Okay. So Ryan Burge, who is a Holy Post pundit and a sociology professor at Eastern Illinois University and a Baptist minister, he does tons of work on data and,
Southern Baptist.
Not Southern, East, what?
He's not.
I just said Baptist.
I know. Yeah, that you think Southern Baptist when you hear that.
He's not Southern Baptist.
He has like 12 people in his church, and they're all over 70, he says. It's like tiny little church.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm a tiny little church. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, he wrote a piece about, I think it was titled, "Has Church Become a Luxury Good?" And it was based on all this data of who's really engaging in church these days. And what he found is it's disproportionately people who are highly educated, wealthy, and in traditional nuclear family setup. And he argues that we have constructed church in such a way in this country that it's now really hard for people who are dual income households or single parent households, or people who, as he put it, didn't do things in quote unquote the right order, which means you finish your education, you get married, you have kids, like all those things in the proper order leads to more affluent and successful life in America today. And that's really who the church is geared toward. And people who have anything not in that proper order are finding it incredibly difficult to engage in the church. Sometimes for social reasons where they don't feel welcomed because they're divorced or a single parent or mixed house, whatever it is, or economically, they just can't engage church because they're working a lot more as a two-household income, and they're just exhausted from trying to make ends meet. And the economic disparity between rich and poor in the country is getting wider and wider. And the reason I think this is an underappreciated story is we're all hearing stuff about how people aren't going to church anymore, and the church isn't being effective. We're not reaching the culture. And I wonder if the bigger narrative here is that the church has been really, really slow in America to figure out that its mission field has fundamentally changed, and we're not willing to adapt our models to the reality of our mission field. And so when we are seeing stories and evidence that church is really only working for people who have life basically figured out already, that's not good. When the poor, struggling families, single parents, all those are not going to the church because they don't think it's for them, and the church isn't even structured in a way to meet their needs where they are, that's a problem. And last thing, and then I'll just open it up for all of you to say that it's a dumb idea, Skye. The idea of church primarily being a large event on the weekend is prohibitive for so many Americans today because they're working on the weekends and their kids have special engagement needs, and not just youth sports, but there's like, life is not what it was in the 1960s, but church is almost unchanged from the way it was in the 1960s. Some cases bigger, there's better smoke machines and lasers and lights and stuff, but it's basically the same thing. And I appreciated Ryan's analysis of this because I think I've heard so many church leaders blame the culture for what's going on, and I'm not hearing enough church leaders saying maybe we need to rethink what we're doing and adapt to the reality of our mission field. And I think that's a macro narrative that's going to impact all of us going forward.
Well, church is also, the mental picture of church is that this is a great place for families.
Right.
And
only certain kinds of families.
Yeah, but for the first time in American history, half of babies are now born to unwed women. So we don't have families. and it's very economically stratified. If you went to college, you're probably married. If you didn't go to college, you're probably not married. And so church has become for college grads who did, like you said, did things the right way, got married, and now they want to take their kids to church.
And the dominant model of church in America requires a lot of money. Doing church is expensive. The buildings, the staffing, the production value, all of that is expensive. So you reverse the business plan and you go, well, we need people coming to this church who have extra money to pay for all this stuff. Who has extra money? Wealthier, upper middle class, educated people.
Yeah, which then also becomes a geographic thing.
Exactly.
Where do the good churches bloom?
Right.
Where there's money, which is where there are upper class families.
Right.
It's actually what they teach you in church planting.
It is.
They say you go and you find a suburb where there's going to be development over the next 5 to 10 years. And if you can be the first church in and you have a youth group, then you grow with the emerging neighborhoods. And so you even have the pattern where when all of the money went to the suburbs, all of the churches went to the suburbs. And then gentrification happened. And all of the kids who were raised in the suburbs said, you know what, I want to live in the community and walk with a neighborhood. And so then all people with the money went to the city. And then all of a sudden we got a vision for evangelizing the city. So it's amazing how we always have a vision from God to evangelize the place with money. It's like, it's shocking, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like I could have just followed the economic pattern, in my neighborhood where I grew up in, which I don't want to go too far into this story, but when it was broke, there were like only black churches there. And now that part of where I grew up in Huntsville is gentrifying. And now you know who's there planting churches? I won't say y'all. But
You
y'all.
and you.
Like you personally. I think I saw you there last week. And so there is a sense in which, we talk, it's a big conversation that goes on in Black Christian spaces, like the brain drain, where people do, like they're raised in poor Black neighborhoods, they go to college, they get a degree, then they're snatched up in evangelicalism because they can pay a bigger salary than the people who are actually in the community doing the work. And so what you're talking about as far as the money and where the churches are being planted has echoing effects in other communities.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say a historical thing.
Yeah.
Some of this, Skye, goes back to, in the death of the social gospel in the middle of the 20th century, a lot of those churches and a lot of the leaders of the social gospel that were talking a lot about the poor, here's a rich theology for why we should care about the poor. We're not in community with the poor at all. Washington Gladden, one of the preachers that was significant in this era, spent his entire career when he was a pastor. He spent time doing other things, but when he was a pastor, preaching about the poor. And at the end of his life said, and they never came to my church. I hypothetically cared a lot about them, but they were never part. And even not just hypothetically, to his credit, giving money and starting organizations, but in terms of actual reciprocal relationship, that wasn't there. And so there's this larger history where even as kind of evangelical and mainline churches are splitting in terms of how they think about social justice, part of this is also just that a lot of churches, both in the mainline and evangelical churches, moved further and further just geographically away from communities that were impoverished. So I think another part of this conversation too is not just how is our model of church different knowing this data, it's also how have we, I mean, this is like what Paul spends a bunch of time talking about in the New Testament. It's like you are replicating the social structures of the place that you are in, the divisions that define your society you have just left untouched. It's true of most of our churches, even the churches that like one that I go to that I love dearly. We spend a lot of time talking about justice. We spend a lot of time talking about poverty. We really struggle to overcome the biases of many of us, where if someone of a different social class was in our church, we would struggle to build a relationship. Hypothetically, we care a lot, but like actually having a relationship that isn't me serving you or showing up to your, being bussed into your community to provide some service, but actually us being in a reciprocal relationship, there's like really deep social reasons that that's difficult. And I think that's also, there are lots of us that can't do much about the structure of the churches that we're in, but most of us can start working through what would it mean for me to be in a relationship with someone who is experiencing poverty and not have it just be a charity relationship, having it be a truly reciprocal relationship.
It reminds me, years ago when I was at CT, I interviewed a church leadership team in the city, Chicago here, that was very ethnically diverse, multiracial staff, multiracial church, and they really prided themselves on doing that good work. And so I asked them, like, what is the division here then, if it's not racial? And they were like, well, we're all rich. Like everyone in the rich or upper middle class. And they're like, the much harder thing to overcome are the class differences, the economic differences. It's much easier to relate to somebody who may be of a different ethnicity than you if you make the same amount of money. Yeah. And you live in a certain lifestyle. Much harder to engage with somebody who might be your same ethnicity, but is far poorer than you. And one last thing, like beyond the money thing, the other thing that most of our churches require to function, these highly institutionalized programmatic churches, need a lot of volunteer time and energy. And that also assumes that you have a lot of free time because you're not having to work 2 jobs or multiple jobs. So again, the system is designed to attract, engage, and benefit people who are at the upper end of the socioeconomic ladder. And what would it look like to have systems that didn't require tons of money and didn't require people to have tons of free time to still be a church? That's the question.
I was going to say one of the things is, well, so much history, but what I'll say as briefly as I can, you still see those socioeconomic stratifications in Black churches. And part of that is because the community that they're often in still have the lower income communities, and then you have the people who drive in. And so you do still see in traditional Black churches more economic stratification. And part of that goes back, unfortunately, to like segregation, where everybody was in the same part of town, regardless of where you were economically. And even after that ceases to be the case, and you have Black people who leave those communities, even in Chicago, they still come back to those traditional Black churches for the most part. And so you do see that a little bit different.
Yeah, I read a sermon. My lifelong denomination is the Christian Missionary Alliance. The most famous pastor in the CMA is A.W. Tozer. A.W. Tozer pastored a big church on the south side of Chicago for years. And I read a sermon he gave there in 1955. And it wasn't on the topic of like the changes of the neighborhood or race, but it was just talking about people's involvement in the church in 1955 and how fewer people were able to come because they were having to drive further and they were nervous about parking in the neighborhood. So this had been the biggest church in the denomination. And, it's the pastor watching it shrivel because of white flight, and the church was gone within 10 years, just gone. So it's you think about white flight in terms of housing, in terms of jobs, in terms of factories, in terms of white collar work. You don't think of it as much about in terms of what it did to churches and church infrastructure in cities, because when the churches came back, it was the white collar suburbanites who in some cases were moving back into the city for all the restaurants, and so let's plant a church for all the cool kids. Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Oh, it's my turn?
It's your turn.
So I don't know if this follows the rules either. I'm bad at following rules. But as I thought about like the biggest story of 2023, and maybe I should workshop it with you. You can think of a fancy term for it like nationalism.
Sure.
I want to call it like the self-absorption of evangelicalism. One of the things, and I want to make sure I say this as carefully as I can. Like we should, analyze the things that we analyze, Trump, Christian nationalism. But we're in year 7, right? Of basically the same conversation that has repeated itself over and over again. And one of the things that I talk to my Black friends, especially writers, about a lot is that it is hard to get attention talking about anything related to Christianity that doesn't center evangelicalism. And that evangelicalism is really into analyzing itself. And I'm glad that there's books, but there's been like 15 books analyzing like what's wrong with evangelicalism, Christian nationalism, and like I got it, right? And so I feel like a lot of other issues that were actually the precipitating cause have completely been forgotten. So if you all actually go back a little bit to like 2015 and 16, and the actual police, the police protest in 15 and 16 coming into the Trump election, and the George Floyd stuff. So in actuality, this was anti-Black racism and the historic failures of evangelicalism to deal with that. And we did that for like 90 days. And then we resorted back to what's wrong with evangelicalism? Why does everyone vote for Trump? And I'm not saying that those things aren't important. I'm saying that at this point, if you look around, almost all the people of color have disengaged in that conversation. We just all stopped talking about it. And the question is like, where did they go? Because that was the actual precipitating issue. And so I think that in 2023, I finally realized, oh, this is never going to stop. That we've done this again. And I know that the church isn't the internet. But I now know when I see a tweet, who's going to be mad about it and who's going to be mad that you're mad about it. In other words, I can predict the entire cycle within 30 seconds. Oh, I know who's going to, and so like we all know who we don't like, and we all know that we don't like this person. And so that kind of circular, consistent evangelical infighting has to me become more boring and less interesting as a topic. And so I think that at this point, I personally in 2023, and a lot of my friends, if you take a second and think about it, who's writing these books, who's consuming these books, and whose face do you imagine as speaking about something in 2023? Or even ask yourself this question: what is a news story related to Christianity that doesn't have the word evangelical attached to it? And so the self-absorption of evangelicalism, and maybe if I can say this last thing, everybody benefits from this except for the oppressed. In other words, progressive Christians benefit from having the most toxic manifestations of evangelicalism presented as the whole, because it justifies their ideology. And the people who like that attention also like the idea to say we're the only way to be the Christian. And anyone who's either not attacking or defending that has been lost in the sauce. And so I wonder if 2024, maybe we can't get there yet. 2024, there will be a religious story that doesn't center evangelicalism.
I loved that.
Stop talking about evangelicalism, Phil.
Yeah, Phil, stop it.
What do we talk about?
There's tons of stuff going on.
Trump.
Trust me, it's. I mean, if you ask yourself, like, what are we actually talking about? What are Black people talking about when you're not in the room? Like, what's going on? There's tons of interesting. Like, we talk all of the time, and we don't talk about y'all. We don't. So what do we talk about? I know. Ask us, right?
Tweet about the NBA.
There
That's
we go,
all
the
I
NBA.
know.
No, I mean, yes, I mean, you don't want to hear about the discourses going on in the Black church, but there's tons of things that are raging conversations that are completely ignored. The rise of Black nationalism and its impact on the black church, the black nationalist sects that are standing outside and protesting churches, the long influence of progressive funding on black theological education and how that's influencing black churches, right? All of those things are kind of things that are, or even the brain drain in black churches when they're being hired, if evangelicalism comes back in, they're being hired from their churches to go and be a part of the multiracial church, and what that means for the black church's health. And so there's tons of conversations that I think are completely lost from most of the Christian discourse.
Do you think part of the self-absorption is, and part of the reason the popular media feeds that, is white evangelicals are just a demographically massive part of the country and have a huge impact on our national politics?
Not true. Who won the last election? You can look at, okay, let me give you an example.
They dominate one political party.
No. This is what I'm saying. If you look at the last election, and the election was swung by 5 cities, you can name them. Those 5 cities were mostly black, and if you then go and study the religious affiliation of those people in those churches, they were black people. They were black Christians. So actually, black Christians won the last election, and no one wrote a story on it. There was a video that was only shown for like 30 seconds. They were outside of Philadelphia. This guy actually said this. I think it was Philadelphia. And he said, "We were picking cotton, now we're picking presidents." He said it. And they were singing Christian songs while they were standing in the line. Now, the question is, if you say Atlanta, Milwaukee, Detroit, and Philly swung the election, and you just do a map, what's the church attendance of black people in those cities? Well, then why did no one go and say, did black Christians swing to 2020 whatever election? So yes, evangelicals have a huge impact on the election. But if the black church does not come out in droves, the election goes the other way. And so the influence of the black church on the election is actually an example of an underreported story.
I agree.
Fascinating. We might have to do something about that.
I also I think this is so important, in part because, I spend most of my time around a bunch of students at Duke who grew up in evangelical churches, mostly white students, who are disillusioned with evangelicalism. Maybe they would consider themselves ex-evangelicals. One of the things that frustrates me is sometimes they'll make criticisms of evangelicalism kind of the entirety of their concern. I see this on Twitter a lot. I see it with people in my life. And what worries me is that it replicates the total dominance of evangelicalism to describe Christianity. And it's like, you have learned criticisms of evangelicalism, and I agree with you. It's not the whole of the Christian faith, and you're kind of reinforcing that by making everything about that. And I've had to grapple with this myself of like, what gift am I not bringing to the new faith community that I am in? The gift of criticism of their faults because they have some, or the gift of encouraging the best parts of them because I'm still so obsessed with the culture that I have supposedly left, or the church that I'm no longer in. So I so appreciate that, because I do think those books and the conversation online can so shape our imagination that we've lost any sense of what church am I in now and what does it need from me? And are there other expressions of Christianity that I could be learning from? But I'm choosing to not do that work because I'm focusing so much on the communities that I left.
Yeah, I love the liturgy, and so I don't want to just talk only about the black church. And so, but I'm going to say this. One final example is you can look at the entire, and I don't want to be flippant, but you can look at the last 7 years and the crisis in evangelicalism surrounding the revelation that there are people who say one thing and do the other, right? Is basically what black Christians have been saying for the entire time we've been around. Right? And so if you say, I can't believe the people who call themselves Christians aren't actually behaving in a Christian manner, it's called the letter from the Birmingham jail. It literally wrote it down. And so
Frederick Douglass.
Yeah. Like you can keep going. And so there are resources, and like black Christians have the same kind of struggles. So we see what's going on. There's those struggles are there, but the fact that so little of evangelicalism takes advantage of those resources when that crisis came, in the places that they did go, which are basically evangelicals who had left 20 years before they did. And so that's the self-absorption of evangelicalism, is that it never actually got beyond itself. Or maybe it said, oh, the largely white church that my parents said were bad guys were actually good guys. But it's still the same culture. It never actually got out of its loop. And it's been in that loop for 7 years. And there have been tons of, and like, please, if you wrote a book about it, God bless you. Like, but there have been a lot of books about it. A lot of them.
I'm working on one.
Sorry. And I'm sure it'll be great. I'll buy it. I'll endorse it.
When I was at CT, we got hundreds of books sent to us from all the publishers because they wanted publicity for it. And it was so predictable that when a book came along and it made an impact, it was a hit, within a year, there were 20 other top, it's just, so I think that's a little bit what's going on is there's a lot of navel-gazing going on in white evangelicalism, and a few really good books were written on it, and now everyone's getting on the bandwagon. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think was the first show we ever did. One of the questions we asked was, is the term evangelical too far gone to rehabilitate?
One of the first shows.
Oz Guinness. We had Oz Guinness.
The first show with Oz Guinness.
Like 12 years ago.
Yeah. And we've been, in some ways, too afraid to actually answer that question for 12 years, rather than saying, but that's our lane.
I do remember one thing Oz said, which was, you all say it wrong, because he was insistent. It's not evangelical. It's evangelical.
Blah, blah, blah.
But he's English.
The Brits have don't they have literally the copyright on the English language?
Yeah.
So we have to go with them.
It expired. It's public domain now.
Okay, there we go.
Like Mickey Mouse in January. I just, because I'm going to turn now. Predictions. Okay, so summarize the four stories of the year. Christian Nashvillism. What was yours entitled?
Keller.
Tim Keller.
Tim Kellerism.
Church is a luxury good.
Ism.
Evangelical self-absorption.
Ism.
There we go.
Okay. Applause. You get a mug. Okay. You forgot what we talked about. It was really, trust me, it was moving. Okay, applause. Okay, yeah, that was more. Okay. Skye. Okay. Esau. Okay. It's funny, the applause was exactly tracking linearly to how recently we heard what you said. So, short attention span theater. Yeah.
Do I get a mug?
Surely you have a mug.
$10.
Oh, my son won the mug earlier. Okay,
Yeah, you have a mug, and
Your
you
daughter
get a
won
mug.
my daughter won the mug, sorry.
Okay, looking forward. Predictions for 2024, and this part is fast. My prediction is that this tension, and actually the Kellerism idea, the people that were fighting over his legacy and saying, well, that kind of evangelicalism is past. I think the tension in that argument is going to break in some way. And either there will be a group that just stops trying to say, we're evangelicals, and I'm not sure if they adopt something else, or if they just say, we're just going to do Christianity. We're just going to do the Bible. We don't care what you call us. The Atlantic will just have to wrestle for a new term. And we don't know how to relate to the cultural expression of evangelicalism, that has become so dominant because of Christian Nashvillism and the entertainment complex of conservative Christianity, the political entertainment complex. So I think there's a break, and it's going to happen in 2024, in March.
Wow.
Oh, we don't have to
Very
wait long.
specific.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. What's your prediction?
Well, I have to say earlier when Mike told me about this assignment, he said, Kaitlyn, you're not allowed to say the Spirit will move where the Spirit moves. Because apparently at the 500th episode, that's what I said. Like, God will do what God's going to do, which is my real prediction. But the prediction that I sent him was there are a lot of social scientists saying that the kind of extremes of both political parties are actually becoming increasingly less religious. And that in many ways that actually gets rid of some of the hindrances towards extremism. So I do think at least for next year, the extremes will get more extreme. I actually think they will be less religious just because they might use some religious symbols or language, but I think in actuality will get less religious, and that will mean that they're scarier. There's less kind of opportunity for the community of the church that you might be in to kind of moderate some of your political impulses, and less truly like eschatological reasons to moderate your expectations for political goals. And so that's not really my prediction. That's like some social scientist prediction, but it's at least been true in some of my experiences watching some of the like extreme political ends of the spectrum get less religious, but also scarier. But also God will do what God's going to do. So no one needs to freak out. It's going to be fine.
It's going to be okay.
Ultimately,
but it's gonna get a lot worse.
eschatologically, it will be fine.
It's going to get a lot worse, but it's fine. But it's going to be a lot worse. But it's fine. Skye?
This was a hard one because there's so many things that came to mind, like, the elections coming up, what are the predictions there? There's aliens now, apparently, and we're going to have to find out about UFOs.
There's no aliens.
But so here's where I'm going. I think, and because it is an election year, I think we are going to see a dramatic reduction in the amount of rhetoric, especially coming from the religious right, about abortion. Because even though it's still a huge topic, it's not a winning political topic anymore for the right. And I think the new abortion is going to be parental rights. That is going to be the dividing line of what do you think, and what do churches think, and what do denominations think, and what do Christian schools think. And everyone's going to be measured now not based on just what you think about abortion, which will be there but not as big. It's what is your stand on parental rights. And if you don't give the right answer to that, that will be the new litmus test. And I think we're going to start seeing divisions arise in Christian communities and institutions around that topic. That's my prediction.
Okay.
I predict two things. Sorry, I got to do the thing. God's going to do what he's going to do. And something unexpected will occur. But I'm really worried about the election and the potential of violence. And I think that I cannot imagine a peaceful, non-divisive 24, 25, 26, regardless of which side wins. I think that there's a significant risk of real political violence. And I am worried about whether or not the church, even though we've had plenty of time to prepare, is ready to be the moral voice that it needs to be in that particular moment. I think that we've gotten to the place where we just want to survive elections, and everyone just gets nervous and say, let's get over divisiveness. But I'm not sure that we're now in elections where you can just put your head down from September to January and then start the programs back up in February. I think that
start a new sermon series on marriage.
I just think that I can't imagine this going well. And
okay.
No, sorry, that was dark, but
but God's going to do what God's going to do.
Yeah. I feel like I need to pull out my ukulele. Okay. Those are our predictions.
Are we going to do like audience vote on those
too?
It's
too depressing.
It is
You
kind
don't
of.
wanna-
Who wants to cheer political violence?
I mean, it's an election year.
Yeah.
Well, and these
Yeah.
are just 2024 predictions, right?
Yeah.
Because if you had said longer than that,
Well,
I would confidently say Jesus Christ will return and make all things right, and new heavens and new earth, and we will live in harmony and peace and perfect justice.
that's not a prediction.
It is true. It's true.
You couldn't say that.
There you go.
I just think in response to Esau's prediction of coming political violence, it is one of the greatest Christian resources we have, that we believe in the resurrection of the body and redemption of all things.
After 7 years of political violence, when are we raptured? Is it before the...
Different Bible interpretation. So I would say the positive thing that I would say is there are Christians who we aren't paying attention to, who are doing significant work for the kingdom of God and who are providing an alternative narrative. And I'm actually hopeful about the future of the church, because I think there are churches and leaders who we don't cover who are paying the price to be faithful. And I think a lot of those people, and I'm not trying to be nice to you all, the people who for whom it would have been easier to polarize, but they continue to do things like listen to the Holy Post because they're actually looking for a better way. And I think in part, the response to the people for what you all have been up to is actually you're just asking like, where's Tim Keller? There is a desire for something other than the options on the table. And I can feel the hunger of the desire for an orthodoxy that loves its neighbor. And how it's going to emerge, I don't know, but people want it. And I think that community is not on the verge of dissolution. I think it's actually growing in strength.
Amen.
Okay, well, that was encouraging.
Yeah,
And the other thing that could really turn things around next year,
yeah,
a documentary from Rob Reiner.
Every time I pull it out, you just
Bring people together.
Yeah, there we go.
Bring people together because they love Princess Bride and they love Jesus. That's where it crosses over. Me and Rob Reiner skipping down the lane, holding hands.
This episode of The Holy Post is sponsored by Hiya Health. Hey, do you have kids? Do you care about their health? Of course you do. Most kids' vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk kids really shouldn't be eating. That's why Hiya was created, the pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin for kids. 0 sugar, 0 gummy junk, yet they taste great and are perfect for picky eaters. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste they love. And we've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you need to go to hiyahealth.com/holypost. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/holypost and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. And thanks to Hiya Health for sponsoring this episode.
This episode is being sponsored by AG1 by Athletic Greens. Some of you know that my dad is a doctor, and as I get older, he's always telling me to watch my weight and exercise regularly. But in the last few years, he's also been telling me to pay attention to my gut health. He's been persuaded by all the research saying that the biome of good bacteria that lives in our guts is critical to our long-term health. There's just one problem. I hate taking lots of pills and vitamins and supplements. And why do they always have to be so big? That's one of the reasons I was excited to try AG1 by Athletic Greens. AG1 is a foundational nutritional drink with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food ingredients. I take it first thing in the morning before I've had my tea and before I jump into my morning routine of writing my daily devotional. And I'll be honest, it tasted way better than I expected. I've been doing it for a few weeks now, and I feel great knowing I'm supporting my health and not having to gag down a bunch of giant pills every morning. And that's why I've stuck with it, because AG1 is a super easy daily habit. So, if you're looking for a simpler and cost-effective supplement routine, check out AG1 by Athletic Greens. And right now, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/holypost. That's athleticgreens.com/holypost.
We're going to play a little game to wrap it up. A little game from, wait, don't tell me. We're going to pick someone from the audience. We're going to give you 3 news stories. One of them is true. You have to pick the true story.
And Esau's going to play along.
And then after you have picked what you believe is the true story, Esau is going to vote as to whether you're right or wrong.
Yes. And I don't know the truth, so I don't know which one
Esau, you know the truth.
Oh, thank you.
And it set you free. Okay.
Hey, you guys know Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR show?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, some of you are familiar with this. Do we have to have our contestant first?
Yes, we need a
Yes.
contestant.
Okay, how are we going to pick the contestant?
I don't know. Skye, pick a contestant.
Someone volunteer.
Who wants to be a contestant?
First, you got to go,
Okay.
woohoo,
We got-
whatever. Okay.
Okay, we got 3 rounds. We're doing
What's
3
your name?
rounds.
What's your
My
name?
name is Janet.
Janet.
Yeah.
Okay. You know how this works.
I do.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay. let's start with you.
You start there.
Let's start with me. Yeah, okay.
This is what Mike told us to do.
It's very slippery to my mind,
Okay.
what Mike said. It was so long ago. Okay, story 1. Police called as flat earth debate at local church devolves into chaos. A church-hosted debate between 2 Tennessee pastors on the topic of whether the earth was round or flat devolved into violence when, after 4 hours of heated debate, the pastors began throwing microphones at each other. Police were summoned when a member of the flat earth contingent rammed several round-earther cars in the parking lot. The question of the shape of the earth was left unresolved. That is story 1. Story 2.
Kaitlyn.
All right, story 2 is Duke Divinity School students confess their sins to farm animals. In a student-run service before the start of the fall semester, a group of Duke Divinity students gathered to confess their sins to an assorted group of farm animals. We confess together that we have abused our fellow creatures, dominating them rather than loving them, consuming them rather than communing with them, the leader of the group began. The service included communal prayers, laments, and a short sermon taken from Genesis 1:29. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seeds in it. They will be yours for food. The service attracted criticism and ridicule on social media, with theologian Rod Dreher tweeting that the service was an affront to Christian theology and Western civilization, and other posts pointing out that the students participating in the service were not entirely vegan. The Divinity School issued a statement that clarified that student-run chapels are not under the purview of the school's leadership, but that the leadership commends the students for engaging in creative worship practices that acknowledge the environmental impact of eating practices shaped by global capitalism.
Okay, that was number 2. Number 3.
Story number 3. Black Sabbath guitar bought at auction for nearly $300,000 to be destroyed. A black Fender Stratocaster electric guitar that once belonged to the band Black Sabbath was sold at Sotheby's for a whopping $296,000, nearly 10 times more than the opening price. The guitar was used to record the famed heavy metal band's debut album in 1971 and is autographed by Black Sabbath's original members, including frontman Ozzy Osbourne. Black Sabbath invented the heavy metal genre, said Sotheby's auctioneer Nigel Farthington, making this Fender guitar a holy relic for rock and roll fans. The guitar was once smashed on stage during a concert and put back together and is no longer playable. But that does not concern the winning bidder, Walter Caniff from West Palm Beach, Florida, because he plans to destroy the guitar for religious reasons. Heavy metal music is satanic, Caniff said, and it's destroyed millions of lives and families. After the auction in London, Caniff was asked if he would consider selling the Black Sabbath Stratocaster at a considerable profit. Never, he declared, I'm sending this guitar back to hell where it came from. Okay.
Okay, number 1, police called as flat earth debate at local church devolves into chaos. Number 2.
Duke Divinity School students confess their sins to farm animals.
Number 3.
Black Sabbath guitar bought at auction for nearly $300,000 to be destroyed.
No, you got to vote. You got to
go
guess. Yes. What are you?
Which one
thinking?
is
Where are you leaning?
a true story?
I'm going to vote that you're not correct. That how this works?
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean,
You get a mug if you're
I'm going with Phil's.
the flat earth.
Flat
one?
Earth.
Okay.
You are correct.
Whoa, nicely done.
I know the one that Kaitlyn's based upon, and in actuality,
I
they
know.
prayed to a tree.
They played to
and it wasn't at
plants.
Duke. It was at a different
At
school.
Union, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, I knew that one, so I was down to 2.
Mount Juliet,
You were the wrong
Tennessee,
person for mine.
The December 2nd flat earth debate between Pastor Dean Odell, flat earth, and the host, Pastor Greg Locke, spherical earth, came to an abrupt end after 4 long hours when Locke decided Odell and his followers had not come in good faith, but were only there to attack, intimidate, and provoke Locke and others who were there for a peaceful debate based on the Bible. Police were called when one of Odell's followers started ramming cars in the parking lot. December 2nd, this year. Okay, round 2. We need a new contestant. Who wants to play? You with the mustache. Mustachio gentleman number 1.
What's your name? Jonathan.
Jonathan, where are you from?
I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, did we didn't yell for Missouri, did we? Anyone from Missouri? Anyone else from Missouri? That's all you got? Okay. Round 2. Story 1. Church potluck features Trump statue made of cheese. A recent all-church gathering in Orange City, Iowa, featured a special guest, a statue of former President Trump carved from 30 pounds of cheddar and Munster cheese. The skin tone is surprisingly accurate, said one happy parishioner.
That's it.
Yeah, it's concise.
It's very short. Okay.
Story number 2.
Story number 2. May the swift be with you. One local church is proving that fandom and faith go hand in hand. Brentwood Presbyterian Church in Los Angeles recently wrapped up a 6-week sermon series called The Gospel According to Taylor Swift. The pastor of the church, Dave Carpenter, attended one of Taylor Swift's concerts at Sophie Stadium as part of the Eras Tour and called it a religious experience. The sermon series started with, "Would Apostle Paul be a Swiftie? Whose friendship bracelet would he have?" The next week, Carpenter preached on mental health with a sermon titled Jonah the Anti-Hero. When asked why he created this series, Carpenter said this, "We keep talking about what makes the church relevant. Is it still relevant? This is one way BPC is saying we are relevant. The church is relevant, and the gospel of Jesus Christ is relevant. This gospel we preach, study, and claim allegiance to is a call to a radical, revolutionary, countercultural movement. Or, as Taylor would say, with the liars and the dirty, dirty cheats of this world."
Okay, story number 3.
Churches invest in the growing non-alcoholic beverage industry. If you like the taste of alcoholic drinks but don't like the effects of alcohol, you're living in a golden age. Budweiser recently used the World Cup hosted by anti-alcohol Qatar to launch Budweiser Zero. And pop star Katy Perry, supermodel Bella Hadid, and NFL defensive end J.J. Watt have all launched or invested in non-alcoholic spirits and craft breweries. The booming market has even attracted the attention of the church. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which believes drinking alcohol is a sin, is the lead investor in Beehive Brewery, a non-alcoholic startup in West Jordan, Utah. Southern Baptists are also entering the field, but on a smaller scale. In Arizona, First Baptist Church of Flagstaff is partnering with a local company, Kingdom Coolers, to launch a new brand of non-alcoholic refreshers for Christians. Conservative Christians have a reputation as teetotalers, said Pastor Bill McGowan, but we're also the pioneers in the non-alcoholic industry. McGowan is right. Welch's grape juice was created by teetotaling Christians in the 1800s as an alternative to communion wine. And if demand for non-alcoholic beer, wine, and spirits continues to explode, he says churches will have new tools to engage hard-to-reach young people like outreach keggers and Bible beer pong.
Is it John? Jonathan. Okay, Jonathan. Number 1. Church potluck features Trump statue made of cheese. Number 2.
May the swift be with you.
Number 3.
Churches invest in growing non-alcoholic beverage industry.
Which is true?
I feel as though I've actually heard Skye's. Like, I think that I have read that.
Wow. Esau?
I'm going to disagree and hope that there's nothing called Kingdom Coolers. And I'm going to hope, I think the least disturbing of these is Kaitlyn. So for the good of the church, I'm going to hope that Kaitlyn tells them the truth. Okay, now we can find out.
We can play the news clip for this one.
Oh. Let's hear it. Yeah.
And is
All right,
presenting
we get it.
the
We
sermon.
get
It was
it.
truly
All right.
That sounded like an SNL skit.
Yeah, it does. It does. You don't get a mug. No mug for you. You get froth on your mustache anyway. Okay. Round 3. You are right again.
I'm 2 for 2. I'm good at this.
Dang.
I listen to that show all of the time though, so
Yeah.
I know how to do it.
How would that make you?
Because I'm an expert at this.
Oh, okay. Okay. Round 3, story 1. Oh yeah, we have to. No, you're right next to mustache guy. That wouldn't be fair. You. What's your name? Sarah. Okay. Sarah, are you the dentist? Yeah. Dentist from Columbus, Ohio. Woo! Buckeye teeth. Okay. Round 3. I think it is. Round 3, story 1. Pastor's side job as exotic dancer raises eyebrows in Florida town. In a tough economy, many pastors have had to take on extra work to pay the bills. One Florida pastor created a stir when it was revealed he had been supplementing his income with work as an exotic dancer at a local club. David danced naked before the Lord, the pastor reportedly said when called before the church elders. At least I'm wearing a bow tie and a thong.
That's it?
That's the story.
Wow. Okay. For such a time as this, Florida church writes Mike Johnson inspired hymn. A Florida church sang a song on Sunday in support of Mike Johnson's recent election to the Speaker of the House, drawing on a biblical passage from the book of Esther. First Baptist Mechanipe worship director Sean Matz wrote, "For such a time as this," shortly after Johnson's election, referencing the line from Esther that Representative Elise Steganik has used in support of another Republican candidate, Representative Jim Jordan. "We know that God appoints our leaders," Senior Pastor Jim Wagaman said. "So whether it's Jordan or Johnson, we know they were elected for such a time as this." The song only references the biblical book of Esther sparingly, focusing instead on Johnson's bold leadership and conservative values. "Bringing back our country to its values, under his guidance we shall never lose," says one line. When asked if it was right to compare the teenage girl Esther risking her life to protect the Jewish people to Mike Johnson's election to a high political position, Matt said, "All our leaders face challenges, especially the Christian ones."
I'm really curious what hymn they wrote for Barack Obama's election, since God appoints all of our leaders. Okay, story number 3. Accused murderer pleads his innocence through a song. An unresolved crime has taken a new twist. 5 years ago, an Illinois man was accused by his colleagues of murdering a coworker. The accused and the deceased worked together for 7 years, and it was well known that the two colleagues did not get along. After one coworker was found dead in January of 2019, others recalled the accused making both overt and veiled threats over the previous years. After a thorough review of the scene, investigators concluded there was not sufficient evidence to charge anyone with a crime. In fact, an autopsy could not even establish whether any foul play was involved in the coworker's untimely demise. But suspicions remained high at the workplace where the accused man continues to be employed. Tired of living under a cloud of suspicion, in a last-ditch effort to clear his name, the accused murderer hired a musician to write and perform a song to plead his innocence to his coworkers.
Do we have a tape of the song?
I don't know.
Okay. Sarah.
This is a hard one.
Hang on, we have to say the headlines again. You're a little eager. Okay. Story 1. Pastor's side job as exotic dancer raises eyebrows in Florida town.
For such a time as this, Florida church writes Mike Johnson inspired him.
Accused murderer pleads his innocence through a song.
Mike
That's so
Johnson.
sad.
Esau?
Mike Johnson. All right, Esau.
I'm not gonna tell you what I think is true. I'm gonna keep it inside.
Just between you and the Lord?
Between me and I think, unfortunately, that Phil might be telling the truth. That's what I hope.
Is it because it's Florida?
I'm trying to think. Do I want to know that one of you made that story up, or if it's true? That's what I'm wrestling with. So I don't know what I want to be the outcome, but it's something's going to be revealed in a second either way. So that's what I'm going to say.
And you said, what was the true story?
I have the true story.
Oh.
And I have to confess, I am the accused murderer. And I hired someone to write a song to plead my innocence. Because 5 years ago, I was accused of murdering Plinky Pete.
Oh my God.
Oh.
And I promise you, I did not kill that ukulele, though I despised him. He was a victim of the polar vortex in the studio,
Yeah,
Phil.
he froze.
And we do have the song. And we're going to listen to the song about the demise of Plinky Pete.
Oh.
It's like, this is your life. Mom!
I know you find it hard to believe I was not the hitman for him. I don't miss him as much as you. There's a limit to what I do. Well, you know I was not his biggest fan, but I hope you see I'm an honest man. Our differences are in the past. The songs and memories will always last. Those songs and memories will always last. I really hope that you believe me. You froze in that little break. It was a polar vortex, for goodness sake. Crying.
One last thing before, that was not me, by the way. I did not write nor perform that song.
That is just what a murderer would do.
Yeah. One last thing, though, before we go. Phil, you don't know we did this, but we're all here because of Phil, really. He 12, 13 years ago, he wanted to start a TV show. We did a couple pilots. That was the last time we had a live audience, was that. And that turned into the Phil Vischer podcast, which became the Holy Post, which we had no plans or grandiose ideas of what that would become, but here we are all these years later. And we have lots of great plans for the year ahead, which we're excited to share with you. But to commemorate, kind of going full circle from the Phil Vischer talk show with an audience to this little live event, we decided that we would get something for Phil to commemorate that full circle. So, Mike, you have it. We have mounted the carcass of Plinky Pete. And it's not completely done yet because we want to do like a tombstone or something in there that says like, you know, something about something that, but we wanted this to be here for you today and the song and all that. So thank you, Phil.
So great.
For starting us on this journey.
You're welcome. It's been a lot of fun. All right. That's our show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon, Holy Post Plus. Because there's new content this week. Kaitlyn is looking for a date. That's
oh my gosh. I would just like to publicly clarify that episode was not an invitation for y'all to set me up.
Okay.
Just want to...
That's just what a murderer would say.
Thank you all for being here and being part of making the Holy Post happen.
Super fun. Thank you all.
The Holy Post podcast is a production of Holy Post Media. Production assistance by Mike Strelo. Editing by Area Code Audio. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by subscribing to Holy Post Plus at holypost.com/plus. Also, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much more.